Thank you, France. I still am quite new to be called doctor. I just defended my thesis, and actually I brought with me 2 copies of my thesis, so they will be available. Making some commercial here, yeah. But actually, it is not the articles in my thesis that I will be talking about today, but it is instead a study that we conducted together with Ecophone, where we really wanted to combine the validity of field studies with the methodological strengths of lab studies. As you are aware, when we conduct studies in the lab, it is researchers likes to do those type of studies because we are able to create a situation, measure, make a small manipulation, and measure again. And by doing that, we can actually understand the cause and effect with it, which is very wanted in research settings. But the problem is are we really able to create the social bonds that happens, for example, in a real office environment? Are we able to reproduce the social interaction that emerge in an office environment after a while people have been working there? Another problem is that might occur is that researchers find different tasks that for the response to conduct, and what we really have in office environments are real people, professionals working with what they are supposed to be working on, so to say. But then the problem with field studies are that we are not really able to isolate the effect that we would like to do. And even if we, so to say, if we're interested in sound and we have an office environment, we measure the sound levels and employees' health and performance, and then we move to a new office environment, and then we measure again, and we know that, well, the acoustics are better now, but we can't really know that it's the acoustics, the improvement in acoustics who drives the change in health and well-being, because there are many aspects that actually have changed. So we wanted to do something different, and after a lot of discussions with France, they funded this study, and what we really did was that we find an office building, the municipality of Sundbyberg. And what was very good with this organization is that they moved to a new city, to a new building, and that's in the new building where our measurement and our study actually began. So they had 5 different floors, and 2 of them were identical to each other. They had the same spatial layout, they were furnished just the same, and the people working there also had the same type of tasks. So they were very comparable between these two on these 2 floors. And what we wanted to create 2 different types of condition as well. So we created a better condition where we actually kept the ceilings that they had. They had quite a good acoustic environment already from the beginning. But we also set up some wall absorbents on the wall. And in the worst condition, we actually changed the ceilings, the good ceilings, to worse ceilings, to more reflective ceilings. And we actually got this study ethically approved, so don't be aware. And and we didn't have any wall absorbents then. So that was the manipulation. We've talked about the 2 different floors, the people having the same task, and this is now the design. So from the beginning, we had floor 5 and floor 4. Here we conducted both objective measures that France are going to talk to you about, and we also measured with a survey, asked employees to rate different aspects of health and performance. During the weekend, Ecophone people went into the office and created two different conditions, in the sense that floor 5 were given the worst condition. They were given the more reflective ceilings and so, while floor 4 were given the better conditions. They were exposed to this for 2 weeks. The third week, we sent out a survey, and we collected the data. Again, during the weekend, we again sent the Ecophone people and switched the conditions. So floor 4 was now given the worst condition, while floor 5 were given the better condition. And 2 weeks passed. They were exposed to this acoustical environment. We collected the data, and surprisingly, we shift the conditions again. So once again, floor 5 were given the worst condition, while floor 4 were given the better condition. And here we really wanted to see. We guessed that by doing this, creating this manipulation, by creating this different condition, we would actually impact the acoustics in the office environment. But what we were really interested in is, do we actually affect people by this? Is this important? Because I guess from a psychological perspective, that's what I would be concentrating on. Okay, we have changed the environment, but does it really affect people? So what we were really looking for was that we could see these type of changes. For floor 4, that they reported less problem at T1, more problem at T2, and again, less problem at T3. And for floor 5 then, that they reported more problem at T1, less problem at T2, and more problem at T3. Right?
The floor plans and the acoustical measurements. We did 2 paths according to the ISO standard for open plan offices. The red dots you can see here, that's where we installed the wall absorbers. I have some pictures later on. So we did 2 paths per floor that would simulate the whole plan. The baseline was a good high alpha value. We also always talk about AC value, articulation class, the American standard, which is showing how far the voice is being spread in the office. In the manipulation good, we installed some wall absorber, and then in the manipulation worse, we shifted roughly 55% of the ceiling into hard reflected gypsum painted. And here's the funny thing, because the people, when we explained to them afterwards, when they conducted the survey, they did not have a clue that we have actually done something. So they could not actually feel it. So of course, the alpha value there is roughly 0.5. We did acoustical measurements according to the new ISO standard 3382-3 for the open plan, but we also double-checked it with the reverbation time according to 3382-2. So here we have the measuring paths. We have 3 measuring points per line, so to say. So altogether we have 12 measurements. And here we have the D to S, the spatial decay on the doubling distance. So the higher numbers, the quicker the speech is decaying. And as you can see, the trend is, of course, the more absorption, the quicker the speech is dropping. We have the LPAS at 4 meters. That's the speech level at 4 meters. Also, you can see here, the trend is the more absorption, the lower sound pressure level. And then we have combined these two, then we can have what we call at Ecophone radius of comfort, where in the room the sound pressure level of the speech has dropped 10 decibels, roughly what we expect, like a halvening of the speech. And we turn that into meters to make it more understandable for a wider audience as well. And as you can see, there are some, in percentage-wise, quite significant changes, even though that the decibels numbers are not that big. We also, of course, measure the SDI levels, but in Swedish conditions, they are really high at all times, so never below 0.7. We, of course, measure the reverbation time, but as you know, reverbation time in Open Plan Office does not really give a good answer to the real issue. And as you can see here, early decay time and T20 quite similar throughout the three conditions. Over to you again.
Thank you. So to sum what Franz really said is that, well, it worked from an acoustical perspective. That's what I hear when when I hear that. Yeah. Okay. So, but did the changes in the acoustics also affect employees' ratings and how they perceive their environment? We looked at different aspects. We looked at 3 measures of distraction. We looked at a measure of cognitive stress. That is, if you feel that if you can think clearly, if you can make decisions in a good way, and so on. And we also looked at professional efficacy, which is a subscale in Maslach-Burnout inventory, which has been mentioned in previous presentations. So this is the disruption in general. To what extent have you in the past 7 days been disturbed by ventilation sounds and so on? There were 4 questions. So do you remember how for floor 4 they went from good condition to bad condition to good condition? So they should report less problem, more problem, and less problem. And that's what actually happened. We got that during the better condition, they reported less problem. When we shift to the worst condition, they reported more problem. And when we shift back to the better condition, again, they rated less problem. How did it look for floor 5? It should look the opposite, and it actually did. We get more problem reported at T1, less problem reported at T2, and more problem reported at T3. How did it look for neighbor disturbances? If we look on floor 4 again, we see that they reported less problem at T1, more problem at T2, and less problem at T3. And again, for floor 5, they reported more problem, less problem, and more problem. Distant disturbances, now you begin to recognize the pattern, and also for cognitive stress, we could find the same pattern. All this graphs or the analyses were significant. For professional efficacy, we couldn't find any significant pattern, and that's probably related to for people to feel that their overall performance has been effective. It probably needs to go more time, because if you're not conducting good work for like maybe 1 or 2 weeks, maybe your overall perception of your work maybe is not affected, because that's how the questions are stated. So that may be an explanation why we didn't find for professional efficacy, but for the other measures we found. And yeah, and I was actually quite surprised. I was a bit worried when we conducted the study. The design of the study is is very strong, but on the other hand, I would have liked to have a bit more longer exposure before we conducted the data. But being in the field, you must adapt, and we weren't able to expose them for a longer period of time, because then we have vacation going on and things like that. So yeah. So to conclude, improved acoustical conditions lead to less cognitive stress and less disturbances. Objective acoustic measure correspond well with self-rated measures, and improved acoustics in open plan offices are beneficial for health and performance. This paper is actually now published in Journal of Environmental Psychology and is available for download if you're interested to learn more.